Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We'll go ahead and get started in another minute or two. We'll let everyone get into the meeting here. All right, we are at 2 o'clock. So we can go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining our webinar today, Mastering ST108 Before It's Mandated. I'm Rachel Schlickbeer. I'm a part of the Marketing and Business Development team here at IWC. Just a couple pieces of housekeeping before we get started. We will save time at the end for Q&A. So as you have questions throughout this, go ahead and send them in the Q&A chat, and we'll get to those at the end. If for some reason we run out of time, we'll make sure to follow up with everyone individually with those questions. And then we will also send out a copy of the slides and a copy of the recording after this. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you, everyone, for attending. I'm excited to have your ear for about an hour to talk about ST108. A little background about myself. I've been in the water industry for 25 or 6 years. Been involved in drinking water operations, a lot of high purity laboratory water, and water treatment as well. And I always somehow gravitate back to the high purity world. And with this new mandate coming, I've really kind of sunk my teeth into what we can offer to educate our customers and everybody on what to expect when this thing comes out. So with that being said, we'll just kind of dive right into it. Like Rachel said, we'll have a little bit of an opportunity at the end to kind of discuss questions. If there's any questions that can't be answered pretty briefly, I will be sure to go through and answer them in an email and get those out to you guys so that all the answers are accounted for. So the objective here is to first get a better understanding of what ST108 is and how it evolved from TIR34. We're going to talk about a real life water quality failure that a facility in Indiana realized, and what changes we can make to impact your facility to get you into compliance, and why early adoption can help your facility by identifying action steps. So water is kind of a hidden role in sterile processing. Everybody knows that the water's there and it's important. We use it for rinsing, we use it for cleaning, we use it for sterilization and disinfection. But sometimes people fail to realize that the quality of that water drastically can impact the operation of your SPD. If you see staining or rust spots or discolorations, any of those can be an indication that your water system needs to be addressed. Sometimes it's as simple as just doing routine preventative maintenance steps, like filter exchanges, things like that. Sometimes it's a biofilm that we have to eradicate from your system. But almost everything that you see on your instruments is going to have something to do with the water that's being fed to them. So in 2019, a hospital in Indiana improperly sterilized their surgical instruments, and nearly 1,200 patients were impacted or could have been impacted. So the hospital had to notify them that there was a potential exposure to hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and HIV through the even though the actual risk was low. So a class action lawsuit was filed for negligence, poor training, and failure to follow proper sterile processing. And just this year, the Supreme Court ruled that they can move forward with the Medical Malpractice Act. So, I mean, we're talking real world problems here that can have, 1,200 people coming after you all at once. So, what can we do to eliminate that? The grand scheme of things here, patient safety is number one, always will be. Keeping those that are, under the knife, under surgeries, safe from HAIs. Also keeping your expensive instruments keeping the warranties good, keeping the lifespan of the money you invest in these tools. Also, the operations, the sterilizers and everything like that. Not one piece of it is inexpensive, and we want to make sure that it runs efficiently. And ultimately, we want to make sure that your survey findings and everything detect no deficiencies. So we all know what TIR34 was. It was more of a guidance document, not a standard. It was a tool that provided you with some best practices, but they were all just suggestions. It was inconsistently interpreted, and that is an understatement of all understatements. I mean, it was almost just like, hey, if I were you, I would do this. No enforcement or accountability. And as the complexity of the instruments used in SPDs increased, it was no longer going to be effective enough to control contaminants. So that's when the change came in to play. And it was driven by industry-wide concerns of inconsistent water quality, worsening biofilm and microbial risks, more intricate instrumentation, like we talked about, and costly operations, and just a simple desire for enforceable expectations that keep patient safety at the top of the list. So, what is ST108? Well, it's a lot like TIR34, only now those suggestions are now, actual rules, and it's a standard. And so it defines the water in three separate categories, which are utility, critical, and steam. It establishes quantitative water quality limits, establishes testing frequencies and documentation requirements, formalizing a water quality management team, and then the need for validation. So all of the instruments and equipment that you'll find in an SPD was also ran through a validated system before it came to your facility. So those standards stay the same with the equipment used. So here's just a little breakdown of some of the main differences between the two. And if you look, I mean, the real thing is, you've got general recommendations, general guidance over here, actual limits, actual frequencies, actual, documentation. And that's just the difference between guidance and a standard. And we believe that when the Joint Commission adopts this as a mandate, some of the questionable variability that is still existent in ST108 is going to have to be more defined. They're going to have to, they're going to have to um, address the fact that there's nothing in there that really says how many samples are needed or how many of the sterilizers are needing to be tested. So there's just a lot of ambiguity there that they're going to have to define. And when that happens, we will update all of our information to spread the word to everyone that needs to know. So we talked about the three categories of water: utility water, critical, and steam. So when you look at your utility water, what you're looking at is the water that's used for the flushing, cleaning, detergent dilution. This is usually the big basin sinks that you see at the beginning of the SPD on the non-sterile side of the room. Usually, this water is pre-treated and gone through like an RO system or a DI system. Once the water leaves there and it's going into your sterilization equipment, your wash tanks, what's the name of that machine? I'm not even going to trip over it, but once it gets into your lab, that's where we consider it critical water. And this is for final rinsing, water disinfector, final stages, and then obviously your big steam machines, your big sterilizers. Contamination affects final sterility here. So we want to make sure that as the water goes through these phases, that we are being cognizant about the water quality contaminants and the documented laboratory samples that need to be done on a regular basis so that we can follow the problem. So a lot of times my team gets pulled into an SPD saying, hey, we have this problem. It's discoloration on our instruments, or it's discoloration after the cart comes out of the cart wash. and everybody finds himself in the blame game where this guy's blaming that guy, surgery's blaming everyone else, and then lo and behold, the water system itself gets blamed. So this is where these three different parts come into play, because first you have to understand, okay, where's the water coming from? What testing have we done to prove that this could or could not be a water quality issue? And then just go down the rabbit hole and figure out where it's at by doing just simple routine testing. So, making sure that the water quality parameters are measurable, these are just a few of the numeric values that ST108 is asking for. There's a total of 19 water quality contaminants that they want you to test for on a regular basis. These are the real game changers. These are the ones that are going to leave you scratching your head and really are going to impact the way your water is used and consumed. But they're also the easiest ones to control if you have the right equipment in place. So that's something that that my team is really good at, walking into an SPD, looking at the existing equipment that they have, doing some simple tests to let the data drive the decision, and then suggesting some upgrades to the system to control conductivity, bacteria, endotoxins, TDS, things like that. So the system design is equally as important. If the tank is undersized, if the pump is oversized, if the RO is expected to be at 10 GPM and it's only designed to be at 5, these are roadblocks that are going to cause your system and your equipment to be less efficient. So what we want to do is we want to look through the system. We want to make sure that you've got an enclosed storage tank with a V or the cone bottom that's recirculated so that the water isn't sitting stagnant. We want to make sure that the velocity of the water in the loop is above a certain number so that we don't contribute to bacterial contamination. We want to look at the distribution, design, and materials. Make sure there's no dead legs that got lopped off once upon a time when a piece of equipment was taken offline. Storage tanks we talked about, disinfection frequency and method. We want to see clearly defined parameters and schedules for consumables to be swapped out with documentation when they're done. We're really just building a story about how well and we are maintaining our system. And then if we're doing frequent disinfections, let's talk about that in the documentation as well. And then looking at the sizing of the equipment, everything from the pretreatment to the RO to the UV. Okay, I keep talking about documentation because in this world, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. It's as clear as that. So what they're going to start asking for is that all your tests and defined frequencies are documented so that we can track, setting up alert limits and action limits so that we know what to do if we exceed something. So that way, every sample out of spec doesn't become a shut down the SPD alarm, because a lot of these can be just simply fixed. It's just important to know what to look for when you see a sample that's out of spec, and how to elevate that and know, what does this mean? Does this mean that we have to shut down? Does this mean the water's contaminated, or is this just something that we can move forward with but correct it? So one of the key differences from TIR34 to ST108 is, you probably saw that the water quality management team has to be adjusted. So no longer is it just the facilities engineering, infection prevention, and the water treatment partner. Now sterile processing is joining that team. And the reason for this is because sometimes the water that they're testing for Legionella control is the same water that's being fed into your system. So we want to be part of that team. We want to make sure that we have a team-like environment where, if there's a problem in IP with the potable water in the building and that water is feeding our SPD, we need to be aware of it, and we need to introduce the new rules and expectations that ST108 delivers onto that team so that they're equally aware of what we're doing with the water in the building. So right now, whenever my team enters a hospital, there's either one of two things is happening. Either the customer is saying, well, we're not going to adopt ST108 until it's a mandate, or yes, we've already adopted ST108 and we could use a little bit of help. So I thought, why not talk about why the early adoption pays off in the long run? So ST108 is always already referenced during the Joint Commission CMS surveys. If you've had a recent one, I'm sure they started talking about it and started saying, asking about what you're doing to be in compliance. I know that over the past 11 months, every VA hospital that I've ever heard of is already adopting it. And if history tends to repeat itself, that's what happened in 2016 when the regulation for the CMS regulation for Legionella sampling and water management plan compliance happened. As soon as the VAs adopted it, all of a sudden it went live, and it was an absolute scramble. So everyone that waited until the mandate had to step in line, and we were busier than we could possibly be. It was insane. So being reactive can be costly because it costs you time, whereas proactivity builds operational stability and operational reliability. So if we adopt it early, we have the opportunity to uncover problems long before we have to fix them. So if we come in and we do a gap analysis of your system and we identify a couple key pieces of equipment that we don't see, what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll do a full panel sample analysis so that we can show you currently where your water stands if this mandate were live already. Then we look at that information and we identify deficiencies, and then we identify solutions, and then we allow the data that we've pulled from the laboratory to drive the decisions to move forward with these solutions. And what we're doing is we're buying ourselves time, because I think everyone in this room can imagine that if this was a mandate right now and you just started working towards compliance, and then you find out that you need a couple pieces of equipment, and then you find out the bad news is some of that equipment is 30 weeks away. Now we're in trouble. So now we have to really scramble and instead get the equipment in place, be ready for the first audit, knowing that all of our documentation is in line and the better outcomes are going to happen every single time. So from a risk management side, accreditation deficiencies, we can reduce the risk of accreditation deficiencies, infection control concerns, contamination, reprocessing failures, and negative patient safety impacts. So, it's one of those things where prevention is always a whole lot cheaper than reaction. And then obviously, if the sterile processing departments get shut down, we're not talking about a small amount of money. Downtime costs money, maintenance to equipment costs money, warranty failures on equipment that, it's just on and on and on it goes. So the competitive advantage is that, facilities that lead ST108 adoption demonstrate commitment to safety and quality. Number one, that's always paramount. Building trust with their surgical teams, strengthening their accreditation readiness, and positioning themselves as forward-thinking organizers. And, those are the folks that are always considered best in class. So how do we get started? So like I said, the first step that I always do is I never go into one of these as a sales tool. I walk in and I look for a problem, and I'll make a couple assumptions based on the equipment that I see. If I'm seeing any equipment that's not there, I'm probably going to mark it down and say, okay, I wonder how they're getting by without having a final filter in a UV or deionization tank or something like that. So I'll assess the situation, do some samples at different areas just so that we can understand where we stand right now as a benchmark. And then, once the sample results come back, that's when you kind of start putting a plan together. Okay, here's what we've identified from the laboratory as some deficiencies. If you were to put in these three pieces of equipment, it's going to solve all five of these deficiencies. Good news is it's only an 8-week lead time, so we are in front of it and not behind the 8 ball. So we'll put that equipment in place if needed. If not, we just carry on and start putting you guys down a path to, to compliance by talking about testing frequencies, documentation, teaming assignments, and budgeting, and just getting all your ducks in a row. And then this is where we start collaborating. This is where we define the roles and the responsibilities. We meet up with the water management team and set a cadence to who does what and who does what if there's a problem, and then just confirming the communication flow. And then it's just time to implement. Treatment system improvements, adding sampling points, updating SOPs, staff competency training, just all the stuff that you're going to need to be doing when this mandate goes live. This first one or the second one right here is absolutely, absolutely critical because, as many of you know, historically, none of the sterilizing equipment had a sampling port on it. So how in the world can we sample from it? Well, Steris came up with a sampling point that is it does its job, but it's pretty expensive. Other people are starting to adapt as well. What we don't want you to do is get caught in a sales pitch where the sales rep's saying, "Well, if you don't buy new equipment, you can't possibly follow this mandate." That's the kind of stuff that we want to avoid. And then step 5 is just validation. You've got your IQ, OQ, PQ. Basically, you're just going through, you're doing an installation qualification, making sure it operates as it should, and then proving it with the performance qualification. Step 6, monitor improvement. Establish routine testing based on ST108 guidelines. Identify any trending. So if you've got problem areas that seem to come back every summer, maybe it's because the water in the building is stagnant and it's warm out and it's getting hot and then bacteria is growing and then it's inoculating your system. That's the kind of trends that we want to note so that we can prevent them next time they are due to come around. And then obviously escalation procedures. What happens if the samples come back out of spec? Do we have an escalation procedure that says first we contact the IWC, then we contact this, and then we contact that? Because if you don't have those procedures in place and you get bad news, it can be really scary. And when it's scary, you can really make bad decisions. So consistency is critical for compliance and operational reliability. Our goal is to get you guys so good at operating this system that you never need us again. So with that being said, how can we help? I don't want this to be a sales pitch. This is not meant to be, but we can do just about anything. We can help you as a consultant with, developing the plan, identifying the risks, the compliance, the monitoring, the testing, all of that. Really, our goal is to help facilities understand compliance, put you down a path to that compliance. And, if there's equipment to be sold because of it, okay, great. But really, at this point, we just want to make sure that we are a voice of reason and not someone who's just trying to sell you something. We offer training and support. We do free webinars like this for many different aspects of our business. And the best thing about us versus everyone else is our team's got 45 years experience in high purity water. Everyone else is just a laboratory. So when it comes to being a laboratory, that's great. They can deliver the results. But what happens when you need to fix something? They have to call somebody like us. So that's where our knowledge comes in really effectively, because we can walk in, look at it just as a water system, identify problems, and then move down a path to helping you make good decisions on fixes. So we just talked about all that. I'm not going to regurgitate it all. I think this is the Q&A. So I see there's a couple questions.
Yeah, Chris, we'll go ahead and start with the age-old question that we get all the time. When does this mandate go live?
Man, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be the most popular guy in this industry. I'm always asking, at HSPA, I'm asking around, hey, have you heard anything? This thing was supposed to have gone live in May of 24. Then they moved it to November of 24. And then because of the election, they said, we're going to move it to Q1 of 2025. Here we are in Q4. So the answer is I have no idea. What I do, if I were to look at trends, like I said, the VA hospitals always adapt early. And the fact that we've been bidding on VA bids for 11 months and now there's no more out there, like they're all either out for bid already or already assigned to a bidder. We don't see them anymore. So that tells me that they are almost at the point where they have to be in compliance, which we all know what happens next. Everyone else has to be in compliance. So that's probably the best I can say or speculate that it's probably going to come early in 2026. But thank you for your question.
We've got another one here that's just asking more specifics about equipment. Is this regulation going to require people to install new equipment? Can they use their equipment they already have? Can you kind of talk through the process of what that looks like?
Yeah, like I said, our goal is to utilize every piece of equipment you have. We also recognize that there's going to be a lot of people out there in the industry that have stuff to sell you that are going to scare you into thinking that your existing equipment is no longer going to be enough. And why not just replace it all? Um, we've had, we've probably talked to 2 dozen different SPDs that are in that same boat where they're escalating it up to the top to get CapEx funding to redo their entire facility because somebody convinced them of that. Um, that's not true at all. Unless your system is just is just not equipped enough. But there's almost never a situation where we can't take the equipment you have, maybe make a couple upgrades to include a couple other pieces of equipment that ultimately are just going to solve another problem. But it'll all be data driven. It'll all be based on the results from the lab.
Um, can you talk a little bit about, we have a question here that says, do you also, whoops, sorry, it jumped on me. Do you also do the monthly and quarterly testing and reporting, or do you set up the equipment and show us how to test?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We can do all or none. Our goal is not to have a one size fits all solution. Our goal is to give you an a la carte menu of what we can and can't do based on your budget. There's always going to be the customer that wants us to roll out the red carpet and just handle everything. And then, anytime there's a problem, call us and we're happy to do that. We understand that most people don't have that kind of budget. So if you want us to just provide some guidance on what we think that you should be doing to be in compliance, and then we come and take the samples or we send you the sample kits. There's not a week that goes by that I'm not on the phone training an SPD team on proper aseptic sampling procedures over the computer, over the phone, just because people are trying to get involved. Because the more you're involved, the more you're going to be able to take ownership of this program and stop being afraid of audits because you've got it. So really, it's up to you and your budget how invested we are. But yeah, we can fit any budget.
There's a question about instruments getting rusty the first time they go through that they're autoclaved. Can you just talk about some of your experience where the issue comes from and why the rust happens?
Yeah, typically, if you're seeing rust on your instruments, it's precipitated iron. So you're probably lacking a pretreatment piece of equipment that would be used to pull the iron out. So when the instrument is wet from water, you don't see the iron. Just kind of like when you go to a restaurant and you grab your spoon and there's water spots on it, and sometimes people get disgusted by it. That's calcium deposits from their dishwasher. Could it be harmful? Yeah. I mean, it could be a little colony for bacteria to grow. Is it likely? Probably not, because those things go through a sterilizer at 180 degrees. So it's really just an unsightly thing. But at the end of the day, what I would guess is if we tested that water, we're going to see high counts of iron, to which we can put pretreatment in place or filtration to remove it so that you don't see that problem come back.
This kind of goes along with that. You mentioned pre-treatment. Is there equipment that you recommend we should have that help meet those ST108 standards?
Yeah, so the hard answer to that is everybody's water quality is different. You've got people on the West Coast that have really hard water. You've got people, over here who have softer water. You've got groundwater. I'm sorry, you've got groundwater versus surface water, well water versus city water. So there's no one size fits all, which is why, if we were to come on site, we would test things like that to make sure first you have all of the proper pretreatment equipment needed to rectify all the deficiencies that we find. But typically speaking, what we'll see is, for that scenario with the rusty instruments, you would probably put some sort of a multimedia filter in right before your softener. And then even if your facility has a house softener system downstairs, it's always a good idea to follow it up with one in your lab, only because if those guys start to do repairs like we're doing next month at a hospital, if if we start doing repairs on the softener, we're going to inform just about everyone, but almost never the SPD, because the SPD system typically can run with everything else down. But I've seen time and time again where we're chasing a rabbit down the hole trying to figure out where this problem came from. And then we go down to engineering and they say, oh, yeah, we just rebuilt those softeners last week. Why? Oh my goodness, you have no idea the problems that you caused up here in our facility. So goes back to, collaboration with the water management team. We need to know when those repairs are coming. We need to make plans to address the issues that are going to come if we don't shut down.
Another question, just about testing. So if we're doing the testing, how do we handle the notification of the test results if they're out of range?
Yeah, so same thing. And I hate to be so wishy-washy on this, but it's so different for everyone. There's going to be tests that if they're out of range, it's not really that big of a deal. If your pH is a little out of range or something, what that is it's almost like an indicator to us. So if we see the pH drift out, we're likely going to see other problems. So it's really just to help us identify where we're going to see other problems. Whereas if it's an endotoxin that's out of range, now that's a problem. That's something that we need to address immediately because we are potentially, uh, you know, um, inoculating all of the equipment that we have with bacteria the size of a piece of hair, and that's a problem. So each sample is different. So what I typically do when we set up a new account is I'll identify everything that we're going to do. When the results come back, we make calculated decisions on how to fix those. And then we do, after the equipment is installed, we do that same round of sampling so that we now have a before and after shot of where we were, what we did, and how we have fixed the problem. And then the goal is to stay above it and in front of it. So if we start to see changes due to seasonal changes or the equipment that needs to be maintained, that's how we identify how often our filters need to be changed out, how often our UV bulbs need to be changed out. So it's really something that we're both learning as we go because we're learning about your equipment as well as your water quality. But then the idea is after a few months, you guys could kind of take the reign and just call us if you need us.
Okay, we got another question here, just asking about pricing. Can I get a la carte pricing so we know what we're looking at price-wise? Can you just talk about that a little bit? Just, what we would do to be able to provide pricing?
Yeah, so typically when we're just getting started, if we're going to come on site and do a survey, obviously we have to account for our travel and we're going to bring some sample kits. Most of our time is just going to be consultation time. Just standing around looking at your system, asking you questions, learning more about your system and what you guys are doing to fix the problem. Um, we're not going to make any money on it. We're just going to charge you for the samples. I think the last one we did, we had to fly across the country, and I think that entire thing with the samples was less than $5,000, and they probably gained 10 years of experience on their system through that facility. However, we can be really effective over a Teams call or a phone call. If you wanted to stand in front of it and FaceTime me, stand in front of your system and let me see your system, then we don't have to charge any travel. And then we can send you the sample kits and we can teach you how to properly sample. And then you can send them to the lab. And then we can get on another Teams call and discuss the the results together. So when I tell you we can make this very, very affordable, that's what I'm talking about. But if you don't have the time, or you just want to talk to us face to face, we can come on site.
And then we've got another one here. Will equipment vendors also have a proactive approach toward providing more sample ports to accommodate for routine and validation testing?
Yeah, we're seeing almost all of the players getting Steris, Medline. All of the players are coming up and developing some sort of a bolt-on sample port, especially for their sterilizers. When we're looking for a sample port on the utility water, that's something you can just plumb in. On the critical water, it's a little bit different because the material of construction is more important, everything like that. But on utility and critical water, there's probably not much that we can't do with the help of your on-site plumbing staff. It's when you get into the steam where you're really relying on the vendors to come up with something. And I think the ones that don't come up with something, their end goal is to be in a position to where you need to, or you feel obligated to replace all of your equipment with shiny new stuff. So just let it be known that at this point, there's nothing that I know of in the industry from the last 30 years that can't be adapted to.
Perfect. We'll give it another minute or two if anybody has any other questions they want to put in here. Oh, we got a question. Where are we located?
We are located, our facility is in Indianapolis, Indiana. My team is in Northern Indiana, right by the Michigan line. But the rest of our team are specifically geographically located near hub airports and big cities, so that as we're needed, we're not too far away. But yeah, like I said, we try and be as efficient as we can using technology that's at hand. But there's really nowhere we won't go to help out.
Perfect. That's all we had in the Q&A. We'll give it another minute or two if anybody else has any last minute questions they wanna ask. Is it okay to use alcohol in the prep and pack area to run through cannulated instruments? What about sterile water?
So I knew I'd get a doozy question like this. That's something that honestly I'd like to do a little bit of research on before I give you any guidance, if that's okay. Just because I don't want to tell you something and then find out that I broke, AAMI standards by saying to do that. But that's one that we'll identify and follow up with you on, if that's all right.
Okay. I'm not seeing any more questions come in. So thank you everyone for actually we have tap water. That's it. No DI, RO, nothing. Are we in trouble?
I'd say yes, probably, unless you're just just a small facility that uses just one benchtop unit. Without seeing your facility, if you're for a sterile processing system in a hospital, I'd say yeah, you're probably in trouble. Are you alone? No. No, you're not. I've seen a couple times where I walked in and I said, let's look at your water system, and they're like, what water system? There's the tap. It's just plumbed in. So the good news is it's not really expensive. It's nothing like buying new sterilizers when you're looking at cost. It's probably half the cost of one sterilizer to get you a fully equipped water system. So that's good news. But as far as just tap water, I mean, tap water doesn't matter if it's city water or well water. There's just so many contaminants in there that they're allowed to leave in, and your instruments are probably getting discolored and rusted, and you're likely clogging filters within your equipment because of all of the contaminants in there. So yeah, it'd be worth us communicating to put eyes on your facility, and maybe just establish a plan of action.
Perfect. All right. Well, Chris and I will hang on here for a few more minutes if anybody has any additional questions they want to add in here. But that is what we have for today. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining. I hope we made ST108 a little bit more manageable for you. If you guys have any additional questions, please feel free to email us. Our email address is info@IWC Innovations. Our phone number is there on the screen as well. Chris, thank you so much for your time today in this presentation.
Yeah.
We got one more that came in, Chris. Other than the threat of regulatory bodies, how do we get our leadership to buy the proper equipment, or do you have anything to share, like an executive summary?
I don't have an executive summary only because every time we've been down this road, I have asked if we can use this as a teachable moment and without using their name. And I don't know if it's because they were embarrassed, because they were not properly set up or what, but every single time they've said no. But I can tell you this, that it's very easy to get management to approve when you have concrete data, and that's why we start with data. We go in and we'll take some tests, whatever is affordable within your budget, and then we'll use that data to tell you what's going to fix it. And then we take it a step further. Once we get approval for that equipment, we get it installed, then we'll go back and test again so that you can go back to management and say, look at how good of a decision you made. All these problems are fixed. So when you do that, it's a lot easier to get approval, and a lot easier pill to swallow for them to spend money when you can see proof in the pudding. Because most of the time you're asking for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and why does this thing work better than that thing? Well, it's a sterilizer. It still sterilizes. It just does it a little bit more efficiently. What we're doing is truly making those pieces of equipment work more efficient, work longer, less downtime, and we have data to prove it. So
Perfect. All right, that's all we got left in the Q&A. So again, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you again, Chris. Really appreciate it.
yep, no problem. Thank you guys. Appreciate your attention.
You can go ahead and end the webinar.
Yeah, I just looked over my phone and saw your text.
You can go ahead and end the webinar.